One of the biggest reasons most service businesses never reach 100K a month or even reach their first million in revenue isn't marketing. It isn't lead generation. It isn't advertising. It's sales. More specifically, they don't have an actual sales system. They have a random conversation that they just like to wing it. Every sales call sounds different. Every discovery call goes in a different direction. Every objection gets handled completely differently. Every close depends on how confident they really feel that specific day or how confident they feel in the actual call. They are winging the entire process. Imagine if a pilot said to you, today I'm just going to wing the actual landing. Would you get off the plane immediately or would you stay on the plane? Yet thousands of founders do exactly that every single day with the most important revenue producing activity in their actual business. They jump on a Zoom, ask random questions, forget important questions, start pitching too early, then they start to stumble, then they don't know what to say, they talk too much, handle objections differently every single time, and then wonder why their close rate is inconsistent or why their business is not growing. Sales isn't failing because you don't know or you're not confident. It's failing because you don't have a system. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. Elite salespeople don't ask questions to collect more information. They ask questions in a specific sequence that changes how the buyer actually thinks. Every question has a purpose. Every transition has a purpose. Every story has a purpose. Every framework that they're executing has a purpose. Every objection is prevented long before it even actually appears. So this is the difference. The average salesperson has a conversation. Elite salespeople engineer decision making. Today, I'm going to break down the exact sales architecture I believe every service business needs to build if you want predictable sales, predictable revenue, and a realistic path to your first $1 million as an actual business owner. If that all sounds exciting, let me share my screen. Let's get into it. Most of us, when we hear the word sales, we can resonate to the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, where Leonardo DiCaprio was playing Jordan Belfort, who shows in the movie how unethical his business practices and his selling was to get people to buy into something that had no actual value. So when we talk about sales, most founders, most buyers, most people completely misunderstand sales. They think sales is something that you do on someone. But that's completely wrong, right? Sales is not that you do something to somebody. Sales is a process, and the most beautiful process of business, if it's done in the correct way. And here's the part, right? It has to be done in the correct way. It's the most beautiful process where you get to really discover and connect to the other person in front of you. Or if you're doing digital sales over Zoom, it's the part where you get to connect somebody on digital platform, right? And so what you really need to understand here is sales is not something that you do to someone. Sales is something that you do together, right? It's because a sale cannot happen without one person. And when you do the sales right, that's when you really get to know the other person. And that's where the other person really shows you what do they need help with. And sometimes it could be a lot of other aspects than just closing. But here's a big part. Sales is one of the most misunderstood parts of business. Okay, for a lot of you, you think it's manipulative, it's persuasive, you have to do sales on somebody. But it's wrong. It's not. You don't have to do sales on somebody if you're following the right frameworks, the right processes, because sales is not about attacking somebody and their beliefs and then showing them how wrong they are or manipulating them or psychologically triggering them to buy something. Right? It's none of that. It's actually the opposite. It's taking them through a beautiful process where they realize how big is the problem currently, why are they in the first place to be on the call, or if you're doing, let's say, face-to-face sales, why are they there? Why are they searching for the solution? Why have they booked in a call? It's a process you take the person through, right? Here's another one. People think closing happens in the last 5 minutes. It actually doesn't. The close starts with the very first questions. Because the very first question gets your prospect actually thinking. The first question really matters because it's how you set the call up. It's how you set the interview up. If you call it an interview, if you call it a strategy session, doesn't matter what you call it. It's how you set the entire frame for the sale to actually happen. Sale is one of the most beautiful processes I personally think in business that can actually happen. It's where you take a stranger that has a problem and you completely help him to solve that problem. It's you are being a servant to that person, right? So by the time you ask for the sale, the decision should already feel obvious, right? So the close starts with the very first question. So by the time when you are about to ask for the sale, to help them, the decision should be and should feel obvious. Most times, obviously, we will get sales resistance. There's going to be an objection. The reason the objection usually happens is for a couple of reasons. Certainty reasons, financial reasons. It could be for fear. It could be too much of something, right? But let's get going. That's why elite salespeople don't memorize scripts. They understand the decision architecture. It's really, really different. Most salespeople, when I get to talk to most salespeople, they have a script. And all they want to do is memorize the script, follow the script, right? But when it comes to elite salespeople that are making over 100K a month in commissions, right? It's not about memorizing just the actual sales script. Now, memorizing sales script is much better than not having any sales script. I would agree with that. But elite salespeople don't memorize scripts. They understand decision architecture, okay? And so here's a framework that I want to show you. You have a conversation, right? That conversation helps the opposite prospect of you to actually think. That thinking process triggers emotions. Those emotions trigger decisions, and those decisions are what convert into actual commitment, okay? And you have to take them through this entire cycle. Sales isn't about convincing someone, it's about guiding how they think until they are convinced themselves that that's the right decision they need to make in order for them to go from point A to currently where they are, the current state, to point B, the desired state. Okay, so you have to understand that. So that's why it's not a process that you do on somebody. It's a process that you take them through where they really understand how their previous decision making has caused them to be in a place where they currently are, where they don't feel comfortable, they feel discomfort from maybe the results they're getting. They could be overweight, financially unstable, their business could be broken, to a state where they want to go. In order for them to get there, they need completely different type of thinking. And that's the process you take them actually through to show them how can you actually help them and why the process that they have been currently implementing has gotten the results they currently have, and how your process will get them the results they actually want. So it's like changing the hardware, okay? So with this being said, I'm going to share principles that will actually help you to understand this. So the sales architecture principle 1, I'm going to call this the sales architecture principle for one simple reason, because this is something that you actually construct. You have an architecture around your actual decision making, okay? So never wing a sales call. Never just jump on a call unprepared. Never just say, okay, I'm just going to have a conversation and see where the conversation goes, right? Most founders think, I will just have a conversation. That call is all about having a conversation. That's exactly why their close rate stays at 15% or even lower. I have seen most coaches, consultants, and agency owners, because they don't have any sales background, they are incapable of actually closing a deal. The reason for it is because they're having a conversation, just a conversation that they have no intention to actually guiding. They have no intention in guiding that conversation. The way we guide a conversation is by asking selective questions in a certain sequence that help us to better uncover what is really happening, what is really going on in the prospect's mind. And with the sequence of the questions, you also are showing the prospect of what is really happening in his own world. Because if your questions are mixed, your conversation's kind of all over the place, there's no guidance, there's no roadmap in how you take that prospect through to really make that realization for themselves of what is exactly the thing that has placed them in this position, okay? So that's exactly why their close rate, when they're just winging it, is probably 15%, but I would say for most of them is even below. Imagine a pilot saying, I will just wing the actual landing, right? Nobody would get on that plane. Yet founders do this every single day. A professional sales system creates consistency. Consistency is what creates predictability, okay? So predictability is what also helps you to create revenue. With predictability, you can start actually forecasting. It creates also predictability because there's something that we can actually improve. When we're just having a conversation, there's nothing we can improve because there's nothing we can track, okay? So here we go. When you use script and you consistently use script, you consistently get predictable results. With predictable results, we also have predictable revenue. With predictable revenue, we can also have predictable scale. So better systems, better results, more revenue. Sales architecture principle number 2. But before we move to the principle 2, I want to just let you know, using a script is super important. Every Hollywood actor, right, uses the script on the scene itself. On the scene, they're using a script. They're reading off a script. The script is really important because it helps you to have a structure. And if you don't have a script currently, or if you have some type of script there that you follow, but it's not really giving you the results that you want, and let's say you had 30 calls and maybe one you just closed, there's a couple of things that could potentially be happening. The one thing is that your script is really weak and you are just asking random questions, or maybe you just have a little bit of structure that is not really a sequence of questions that help the prospect to really understand what's happening in their own world and how you uncover it and how you actually guide them. Or it could be that you're dealing with unqualified leads. Most of the times, if you are not getting a buying decision out of 30 calls, I am like really certain that the problem is your actual script itself, okay? But having a script is much better than not having a script. So having a script is going to give you the consistency, predictability, and the revenue is going to give you scale. So sales architecture principle number 2, every question must change the buyer's thinking. Let me repeat that because most of you probably don't know this. Every question must change the buyer's thinking. You shouldn't just ask random questions. Where are you calling from? How is the weather out there? Like, how long you have been in the business? What do you like about your business? Like, okay, so where you currently are in the business? What's the big goal? If you are asking big questions like this in no order whatsoever, this is probably the reason why you can't close anyone, okay? Bad salespeople ask questions for information, okay? They just ask for information, like, for example, how long you have been in the business, okay? So like, what do you like about your own business? It's like, okay, so like, are you working with a team? Are you not working with a team? What you currently are selling? What is your competition? And it's just like, you're consistently just collecting information, but there's no purpose for collecting that information. On the other hand, elite salespeople ask questions for transformation. That's the big difference. So bad salespeople ask questions for just collecting more information. Elite salespeople ask questions for transformation. Every question should move the prospect from one belief to another. For example, instead of asking, what's your biggest challenge? I would ask, what is that problem currently costing your business every single month? Okay? One gathers facts, the other one actually creates urgency. We can gather a fact of what is your biggest challenge, but what is that challenge actually costing you? In terms of actual dollars, in terms of every single month, in terms of every single year, what is it actually costing you? Now there's an urgency to actually solve that problem, okay? Because we can see the actual cost of it. So the questioning framework that I want you to use for this is very simple. Questions, you ask the right type of questions. Then is realization. So we move from questioning to realization. They see something new in a new way. Then we move into emotion. They feel the impact of that realization. And then there's decision making. They decide to take actual action because the cost is too big of not taking action at all, okay? One more time, questioning, but you have to have the right type of questioning. Now, I cannot specifically help you now because I don't know exactly what you sell and how you sell, but you should really have questioning sequences. Usually the way we look at it, and we're going to get into it, I'm going to show you all the framework and everything, how to find those right questions. They're going to help you, but you have to have the right questions. I'm going to get into one of the principles that are actually going to help you to do that. So next one is questioning, realization, emotion, decision making. Moving into the sales architecture principle number 3, which is questions must follow a psychological sequence. And this is where we get into it, right? Random questions create random conversations, right? So like, for example, let's say I see you on the street, it's like, hey, how is the weather? And you're like, oh yeah, I love the weather. It's really hot today. Oh, great. Like, what you are up to today? I'm going to the beach. Oh, have you seen the football match? Yes, I have seen the So now it's like a random conversation. There's no intention behind that conversation, right? On the other hand, elite sales conversations follow an actual structure. There's a line of questions that we ask in order for us to really gather the right type of emotion, to gather the right type of realization, to gather the right type of information, to make that right type of decision, okay? So stage 1 is all about the background. Who they are, where are they today, what's their business model. I'm just giving you an example here. right? Stage 2 is current situation. So we go from the background to understand the agenda, right? First, we need to understand the agenda. It's like the same on LinkedIn. If somebody's on LinkedIn, there's the reason they're on LinkedIn. They could be networking, they could be posting content, they want to be educating, they want to be growing the personal brand, they want to be booking appointments and making sales on LinkedIn, right? Once we understand agenda, then we can adjust the agenda accordingly. So here's the same. Stage 1 is all about agenda, the background, right? Then we have stage 2, which is current situation, understanding currently what they are going actually through. So how are they getting clients? What's working? What is not working? Then we get into the stage 3, which is the actual problem, okay? Where are they stuck? What is actually breaking? And why do they believe these things are breaking? And why do they believe this is actually currently happening? Then stage 4 is implications, right? What happens if nothing changes? So like, what happens if we don't change this? What opportunities are currently being launched just because you're having these problems? How is this affecting the business, team, or your personal life at the same time? Then we move into stage 5, which is the desired future, right? Desired future. So where do they want to be? Why is that so important to be there, right? What would achieving it make possible for them? Then stage 6 is decision, okay? What's stopping them? What have they already tried? Why hasn't it actually worked? What needs to happen now? Okay? So, if I was you, I would follow exactly the same process, same stages, right? So these are the stages that we use. Stage 1 is background. We want to understand the agenda. We move into stage 2, which is current situation, understanding where they are now. Stage 3, the problems they are facing in the current state, the implications, right? What is it costing them currently? Desired future, decision making. So then we draw up a very simple framework for this, okay? So there's a background that we understand, we have current reality, we have a problem, we have implication, we have a future, and we want to make a decision. Usually the prospect will make a decision on 2 things, right? The problem and the implication, okay? Because realizing where they could be and where they are now, and these 2 things standing in the front, this is the reason they should be making the actual decision. Okay, they should be making decision knowing that by removing problems and implications, right? Like, so by removing the problem, they automatically will get to the future state. So the implication is just sizing like 10x the entire problem that they couldn't have. So they should be making decision based on problems and implications. Nobody just makes it because hey, I want to get a Lamborghini, or I want to become a multimillionaire, that's why I want to make decision. No, it's like, that's the main goal where you want to get. Okay, but the reason you currently are not there because you have this problem, and this is what the problem is causing you, right? So you show how big is the actual problem, and that's why usually they would make a decision. Sales archer principle number 4 is scripts don't restrict great salespeople. They actually free them. People think scripts sound robotic. Bad scripts actually do sound robotic because it's like, for most of them that I have here and what I have seen, a lot of scripts are like basically interviews. They're just like tens and tens and tens of questions, and when you start reading each question, and when you just like keep following the script and it's just more questions on top of questions, it sounds like an actual interview, right? And that's the main problem. Great scripts actually create freedom because you are no longer wondering, what should I ask next, right? Instead, you are listening, you are diagnosing, you are leading, because a script isn't there to make you sound robotic. It's there to actually prevent you from forgetting the questions that matter the most to ask. Because listen, I have been using scripts, I have been going off scripts, and I can honestly tell you, using script, having a structure is much better than having a no script or no structure in front of you. Because having that structure, sometimes you could be going through a line of questions, like, and you could be like, okay, that's the next question I need to ask. And so you ask that question. Sometimes, right, let's say I'm going off the script, and maybe the prospect throws me off by maybe asking, like, throwing me an actual curveball, or maybe they're kind of get me off track a little bit. So me getting back on a track, I could currently miss maybe 3 to 4 questions that I should be asking, and I didn't ask because I got off track. I got off the track. I didn't know where I was, and then I was like, okay, what's the next thing I ask? And then I'm kind of asking something. This could be the reason why we also are losing a lot of sales. That's why I would strongly suggest you to use an actual script, right? Have a structure in front, knowing the questions you should to be asked. Because sometimes you could be having a conversation with somebody and they can off track you, right? You can go off track, forget what you had to be asking, and then you get back into it and you remembered a question to ask, but that question had no sequence, had no order, and you probably skipped like 3-4 questions. This is why it's super important to have those scripts, okay? Because the script will give you a structure. So, sales architecture principle number 5 is build a diagnostic framework. The goal isn't to sell somebody, and this is the reason why I told you at the start of this video, is that sales is not something you do to someone. Sales is something that happens where there are two people placed in the same position. Okay? And one person is really trying to understand what are the other persons going through and trying to help them to map together of where they want to go, where they currently are, and how they can actually get there. Okay? So the goal isn't to sell, the goal is to diagnose. Doctors don't prescribe medication before actually diagnosis. Neither should you. Okay? So you have data, and data is the questions. The call itself is the data. Then based on the data, you can diagnose. And then you give them a prescription, which is your solution, your unique solution, and that's when they make a decision. So sales architecture principle number 6 is objections start at the beginning. Okay, so this is what you need to understand. They don't start at the end. Objections will always happen at the start, going through when you're asking them questions. That's where usually they will have also objections. So it's really important to handle them before you ask them to invest or before you ask for the sale. So most people handle objections at the end. Elite salespeople prevent objections throughout the conversation. Okay, if someone says, I need to think about it, okay, usually what they really are saying is, I don't have enough certainty. Okay, because let me ask you this. Let's say you would know by buying a lottery ticket you will win the lotto tomorrow. Would you go buy a lottery ticket? And probably the answer is like, yeah, if I know I'm winning lotto tomorrow, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy an actual ticket right now. Awesome. So usually when somebody says I need to think about it, is because they don't believe that they can get the results with what you have actually showed them. So that's where they don't have the certainty they need. Okay. And sometimes you have to also understand is sometimes the reason you get objections is also because it's more to do with psychological. Okay, it's more to do with actual growth, because a lot of times most of the decisions that the people will have to be making on these calls, on the actual sales call itself, will be to do with growth. And growth usually happens in discomfort. Growth never happens in comfort. Okay, and so when they have to make that decision and they're exiting that actual comfort zone, they're gonna feel uncertainty, they're gonna feel a little bit scared, they're gonna feel a little bit like kind of fear of making that decision, fear of making a bad decision, and that's completely fine. Like, that's good that they're feeling that, because that means they're exiting the actual comfort zone. But what you need to understand here is sometimes you need to actually guide them through what's happening. So it's really important. Sometimes you have the perfect process, you took them through everything, they understood what they need to do, but it's just that mental effect that they're currently having of exiting the comfort zone, which is kind of like pulling a lot of signals for them. Discomfort, uncertainty, scared, fear of making a bad decision, fear of loss. And that's where you have to come in and you have to guide them through, because they're currently in a storm and you need to help them to actually navigate that storm in order for them to make that decision. And that sometimes happens. Most of the times it happens. So when somebody maybe says I need to think about it, it has nothing to do with what you have done. Maybe they believe in the process, but they don't believe in themselves. Or it could be a process where they start to feel like, okay, there's like a lot of signals. I feel like scared, I feel like I don't want to make this decision, I'm uncomfortable, I don't have certainty. It's all about your actual certainty. So your job is to build certainty long before you presented the offer, but also after you have presented the entire offer, is to help them, to show them that certainty doesn't come necessarily from waiting. Certainty doesn't come from you having more time to decide something. Certainty comes when you see the actual proof, when you see the actual results that you have done. It's like going to the gym, right? It's like you could be waiting for the perfect moment to go to the gym, because then you're like, okay, I'm certain that I'm going to get the results in the gym. Or you can be in the gym, start seeing that you are losing weight, and then you get certain that the actual gym is working. But obviously before the gym, you will feel uncertain because you haven't seen the results. So you maybe say, hey, maybe I shouldn't go to the gym. Maybe I'm not going to lose the weight. Maybe I'm going to lose the weight. I don't really know. I'm going to wait for the perfect time. I want to feel like, this is the right thing for me to do before I commit fully, right? But that's not how you're going to get certainty. Certainty is only created in a place where there's consistently an action happening. It's a recording action, consistent action that has evidence. And that evidence is the certainty that you have been looking for, that decision you made a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, a year ago was the right decision for you. Okay? So you only get certainty by doing something. So this is the certainty framework, right? So uncertain, on the call, obviously everybody starts with uncertainty, like, is this the right guy? Is this the right girl? Is this the right solution? Is this the right call? Is this the right thing I'm doing, right? So uncertainty, questions, clarity, certainty, and then commitment, right? And sometimes even when you ask for commitment, they will have uncertainty. You need to help them to understand things. And then once you help them to understand where clarity and certainty actually comes from, then they're going to be committing. So next one, or just before we move on, also need to understand, sometimes you will just get objections. It's part of the actual process as well, okay? Sales architecture principle number 7 is build a sales operating system. Your sales system should end with the call, okay? It should include lead, qualification, booked call, confirmation, sales call, follow-up, payment, onboarding, client success. Simple, okay? You should have a system. You should never just leave the booking or something in hands of God, okay? You should simply have a system for your actual sales. You should have a lead coming in. You should have a qualification process that puts you in the best position to actually help that lead. You should have a booked call, so they're booking in that call. You should send them confirmation to make sure that you have a show-up rate. You should also have that sales call with them. And then after the sales call, sometimes there could be a lot of things happening and you're not going to close every single person. So you should have a good follow-up. Then it's a payment method, onboarding, and client success, right? Most founders optimize the sales call. Top companies optimize the entire system. This is the system you should actually follow, okay? Sales architecture principle number 8, which is measure everything. Every sales system should have KPIs, right? So what you need to track here is lead, booked call percentage, show-up rate, qualification rate, close rate, average deal size, sales cycle length, follow-up conversion, and the revenue per sales call. What gets measured can automatically get improved. If you have none of these numbers, we don't really know what's happening. It's like you're like, oh, my close rate is, I don't know, 70%, 80%, and you only booked, let's say, 3 calls and you closed 2 of them, and then suddenly you got 10 calls and you'd be like, you look at the numbers and it doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, but my close rate was 80%, but yeah, it was 80% at 3 calls and you luckily closed 2 calls, but then now you have 15 calls and your close rate is maybe 20%, right? And you think, what's happening? It's because when you look at the numbers, it makes sense that, hey, the volume has increased, right? So when you have these numbers, it makes sense. When you don't have them, you don't really know what's happening. So like also you need to see, okay, lead to booked call percentage, right? So like how many leads are booking? How many of those leads that have booked in are actually showing up? How many of those leads that actually showed up are qualified? How many of the qualified leads that actually did show up, how many did we get to close? What was the average deal size that we actually closed them on? Sales cycle length as well. What was the average time we actually took a lead that booked in, that went on a sales call to actually close? What was the average time? Then we look for follow-up conversion as well, okay? A revenue per sales call. These are really important numbers in your actual sales system. Sales architecture principle number 9 is build the entire machine. Sales isn't an event, it's an operating system. The founder shouldn't be asking, how do I close more sales? The better question is, how do I build a sales machine that consistently creates buying decisions? So the framework you must understand here is, guys, this. You may have YouTube, you may have email, you may have LinkedIn, you may have DMs, some type of method that you are getting attention and traffic, right? So the traffic is you attract the right people to you. Process where you ensure a good fit, you diagnose, uncover the real problems, you show them to present the right solution, guide them to make that confident yes, you follow up, stay top of the mind and handle objections and deliver results, create raving actual clients. This is the framework that I want you to follow. Traffic, qualification, diagnosis, presentation, decision, follow-up, and client, okay? And then repeat and you get more referrals and your business automatically starts to grow as well. And it's not only about referrals, but you should get referrals if you following this process. You have a good delivery process. Your clients are happy. You should get more referrals. You should build more revenue. But you shouldn't be just relying on referrals because referrals could just die off and you can never measure it. So you should have a system in place that consistently brings traffic to you, okay? Most founders think selling is persuasion. Like I already said, it's not. Selling is architecture. You architect entirely, and it's the most beautiful thing that happens in the business, because it's where two people come together and you are serving that one person. The better the architecture, the more predictable the outcome will be. Before you leave, I want to give you something really special. It took me years of failures, mistakes, lessons, client work, and real-world experience to understand what actually builds a successful business. And no, not the theory type, not the social media advice, not some vague advice I got from a book, but the real actual fundamentals. The things that create predictable growth, strong leadership, scalable systems, and long-term success. So I condensed everything into a single scaling actual roadmap. It shows you exactly what to focus on at every stage of growth, so you stop guessing and start building with actual clarity inside of your business. If you want it, click the Instagram link. It's down below in the description, and DM me the word roadmap, and I will send it to you over personally. And remember this, business don't grow because founders work really hard at it or because you have to put in more hours. They grow because founders focus on the right things at the right time, at the right stage. See you in my next video.